So we'll just wait for everybody to trickle in.
Yeah.
Ooh. Flurry. I've definitely got the least exciting backdrop out of the three of us. Cole's got a Christmas tree in there.
Solid.
Lights aren't on at the moment. We're getting there.
Shall we get going? Then we can get started. So, afternoon, everyone. Obviously, I appreciate everyone jumping on this afternoon. I know we're all busy at this point in time, but yeah, thanks for coming on. Obviously, as you know from obviously the information that went out about this, this is going to be a little kind of introduction and more information about the sort of COVID-19 and long COVID rehabilitation program from CAWS, which is delightfully headed up by the MD Mel Spooner and Dr. Col, who's the co-founder. So YourPT are obviously partnering and working together with CAWS and obviously all the gym operators that we work with to kind of help individuals in need of kind of recovery and guidance from COVID or suffering from long COVID. So what I'm going to do is just hand over to the two experts on the program. They'll give you a little bit more information about it and obviously talk how you can kind of implement this into your kind of personal training business and the kind of benefits and kind of opportunities that will come off the back of doing the course.
Tremendous. That was a super kind intro. Thank you. Col, just because many of the guys on the call may not have met you before, would you like to do a bit of an intro into you and your background, etc.?
Yeah, thanks, Mel. Yeah, my name's Colin Robertson. I'm a researcher, more researcher these days, exercise and nutrition scientist, and my background really spans over 25 years working in the industry, everything from clinical exercise physiologist all the way through to helping athletes prepare for the Olympic Games, Beijing, London, Rio, training people to climb Everest, row across the Atlantic. I'm a gym operator, so I run a gym here on the Wirral called the UTS, and we also run the UTS Foundation, whereby we support people in our local community all across the Wirral who've had or have cancer, and we give them free ongoing access to exercise and nutrition support. So everything from working as a PT, working as a strength and conditioning coach, exercise physiologist, clinical exercise physiologist, to research and producing peer-reviewed research publications, working on strategies with Greater Manchester Health Innovations, looking at the reversibility of type 2 diabetes through exercise nutrition modalities, again looking at the impact that exercise can have with regards to positive treatment outcomes for cancer and also the rehabilitation in the wake of those successful treatments. And I think pretty much within all that, which goes back way over 25 years, I think that covers pretty much everything that I do thereabouts, unless I've missed anything out, Mel.
No, I would say they're the main things. Lecturing, as an educator, is obviously a key part of your life.
Yeah, research coordinator and senior lecturer at numerous institutes. But I'm actually starting to gravitate away from that and spend more time kind of in research, although I've still got 4 PhD students who've got another year to complete their studies, so I'm still going to be involved in that from a more tutorial point of view. But yeah, I've taught on everything from undergrad, sports science, sports rehabilitation, physiotherapy, sports medicine, all the way through to MSc, strength and conditioning, sports rehabilitation and sports medicine, and then obviously to date 24 PhD students.
So Cole's obviously the academic of the team. I've been in, just real quick I guess, I've been in the fitness space for about 15 years, initially in operations, and then I guess my career super kicked on when I worked at Technogym for a couple of years, sort of about 13 years ago I guess. I left Technogym to join the startup team for MyZone, where I worked with Dave Wright and the team for a couple of years, and then left MyZone to help set up the UK office for TRX. After TRX, I looked after Dynamax Medicine Balls, Viper, PTA Global and PT on the Net in the UK. So over a period of about 10 years, I was massively immersed in education, global educators, presenters, and if anybody's familiar with some of those brands that I just mentioned there, I was very fortunate to be stuck on a plane at a young age and flown to the outer east of nowhere. So I was very fortunate to meet some subject matter experts quite early on in my career. Fast forward in 2014, I set up my first company, which is a project management business where we help sports and fitness brands grow internationally on either side of the globe. And then it was mid 2019 that I wanted to tackle a new education business, which is what brought Colin and I together, given, of course, his education background that he just spoke to there. Colin and I have known each other for probably about 6 years. We met through Under Armour originally, and then, of course, Cole's a gym owner, so we were bound to get on instantly. And the goal of our education company plans last year was to create content, courses and curriculums that provided coaches and trainers with the content that you guys felt that you were missing, that you felt you'd not been able to access in your careers, and that you wanted to get stuck into to help you progress and drive forward. So that was our plan and our intention last year, to build out those curriculums that you guys have been asking for over time. Fast forward to March 2020 and COVID, of course, and massive story short, Colin and I realised that a lot of what we had baked into the curriculums already, and given Cole's background and experience around disease, etc., that we had the means to put together a training program that would help trainers and coaches to rehabilitate someone from COVID and long COVID. So in the very first instance, we reached out to UK Active, YourPT and CIMSPA for their backing and support, and subsequent to that, incredible good people like Aaron, who've done nothing but support us and understand the mission, really. So the purpose of today, and to echo Aaron's comment, huge thank you to everybody that's dialed in and dedicated their time. It's pre-Christmas, it's a pandemic, so for you to sit down with a coffee and join us is incredible. Thank you. We're going to give you a brief overview of the work that we've already started with clubs and trainers globally in terms of the rollout of COVID rehab, and we'll also talk a little bit about some of the nuances around the virus and some of the conversations that we've been having with Aaron. So to kick us off a little, 2 seconds, there we go, technical hitch. We've talked a lot as a sector about the role that we can play in the promotion of good health and to avoid the worst types of symptoms from COVID-19 for an individual. But we've talked a little less about the role that our sector can play in the rehabilitation of someone from COVID-19. And in fact, we can do both really well, and the club and the coach is vital to that. Col will explain a little bit more about what we mean by that and the role that we can play as coaches and individuals.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that, you know, despite what we see around us with regards to government spending on, you know, specific centres for rehabilitation, it's all good and well, but we actually have the pre-existing infrastructure. We are embedded within the community, within society. We're already working because we're immersed within those populations. And the fact is setting up any number of specific rehab centres is just not going to address the case in need. A lot of people, and we'll go through some of the statistics in a minute, a lot of people who are going to encounter COVID-19 will have a pre-existing relationship with exercise and fitness, and won't want to be relocated somewhere else for an interim period to have a level of intervention with regards to their health. And also it's unnecessary, because the skill set that is required is already, if it's not there in completely, the seeds of it are already amongst our profession. This is what we do, is that we help people to overcome factors of physical deconditioning, help them to overcome factors of fatigue, meaningfully goal set, orientate them towards meaningful targets, be the pace limiting step, have a broad exercise vocabulary, be able to monitor their progress and feedback. That's everything we do. That's what our industry does. That's how we tick. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here. What we need to do is just make sure that our skills are right where they need to be, that we understand the complexity of the population, we understand the contraindications, and more importantly, we recognize those, but still see how we can be effective and lead people towards success. It already exists. We don't need to reinvent this. The profession is there and it's in place and it's intact, and arguably it's in the best shape it's ever been. So that's what really CAWS is all about, which is making sure there's an opportunity for those coaches to make sure they're up to speed with aspects of pathology so they can apply what they do, their existing skill set, with this ever-growing population.
One of the biggest questions that we get asked by coaches and clubs is how big is the population that is dealing with COVID-19 and long COVID? So we've pulled down a few slides which help to track how the pandemic has traced over the year, as well as live figures as of today, to give you guys some context, which Col will talk through those a little bit now.
Yeah, I mean, you've probably been browbeaten with this. You've probably heard this reported, left, right, and centre. And obviously, as we've increased our capacity to test, we see more positive cases that are being reported. But that's actually, I know there's a lot of kind of social media kind of conspiracy theorists about that. The reality is through that test, and we get a clearer snapshot of what the reality of COVID is across a population. The debate was always from the start, the epidemiologists, the experts in this area, which very fortunately I work closely with some of them, said that we're never going to get past the first wave. If you look at the seasonal variation, if you look at where we're at in March, unless we brought about a more fundamental, dramatic, longer standing lockdown, then the reality is, well, that first wave is going to back off a little bit, it's going to reduce, but then as we come into the flu season, it's just going to swell right back up. There was never a point at which, and you can see the profile here, midsummer, when we reopened industry to full extent, particularly the hospitality industry, we started to see spikes, and we've started to see the increased prevalence of the virus. And anyone who understands how a virus functions would be able to tell you that that was going to be the case anyway. That was inevitably going to be the case. And as now we're getting to the end of autumn and we're heading into winter, those numbers are going to rise again. If we were having this chat a month ago, we'd have confidently said that the mortality rate was, around about 1%, 1.2%. Globally, the survival rate remained intact at around about 99 to 99.5%. However, as we're in this period, and because of the way the virus functions, we're now seeing a death rate of 3.4%. And there's a lot of things that are influencing and impacting on that. But the key thing when we look at any of the data, the most important thing to consider is more and more people are being infected with COVID-19, and more people will be infected with COVID-19. The vaccine is tremendous, and the vaccine is going to do what it's going to do, but it's going to take a long time for that to roll out. Also, as we're aware, the vaccine is going to be seasonal. It's not going to be a one shot. So there's implications towards that. Data this week has emerged with regards to the strain of COVID-19 on the southeast coast that has morphed again. So we really are, the research that's going into that is playing a really clever game of trying to track how the virus behaves so that they can adjust the parameters around how to deal with it. So more and more people are going to get COVID-19. And because of that, there's a growing proportion, a growing population of people who are being described as long haulers and having long COVID. So whilst the mortality rate at the minute is 3.4, which is terrible, any one death is a death too many. The fact is the vast majority of people survive COVID-19. But it's not as simple as straightforward as that. Some people are going to get really mild symptoms, may even be asymptomatic, and push on like it never happened. But what we're seeing is an ever-growing population group of people in the tens of thousands now, which will reach hundreds of thousands, who have been left with debilitating levels of post-viral fatigue, who are severely deconditioned. And these people, once they're past that acute stage, are the people who are going to benefit from specific support, guidance, and direction towards overcoming those factors.
So, Col just talked then about the rate of change over the course of 2020. Here, we work on COVID data and statistics every single day, and we've been keeping a track of how the virus has grown in prevalence across the UK and other countries over time. So this is just a really simplified way of explaining how we've seen COVID cases spreading across the UK, just really in the last two months to 10 months. So when we first started paying attention to where in the country had the highest cases of COVID-19, there were 29 major risk areas in the country. Within a week, another 7 were added to that list of 29. Within another week, another 13. That period, when the additional 13 came in, that's when we as a nation started to go into the new tier system. And if you look at the heat map of the UK, where the highest number of COVID cases are, which we'll have a look at in a minute, that's when those COVID case count numbers were spread right across the north of the UK, little bits of Lincoln and Hull, started to spread down into Leicestershire a little bit of South Wales, and a little bit of Swansea. We then went into our circuit breaker lockdown. Through that time, we had one additional hotspot pop up on the heat map, which was Medway. We're only a couple of weeks out of that, and there are 18 new high case areas in the UK. Wales, the spread of cases across Wales now is growing at a bigger rate than it has in the last couple of months. And of course, you guys will have seen the rise of concern in the southeast and London that's occurred just in the last couple of weeks. So without wishing to exhaust the point, as Col was just explaining, the rate is by no means slowing down, and there are people in every part of probably in every community that we're all a part of at the moment who have been affected by the virus. This slide explains how the map of the UK and that heat map has evolved over time. So dead self-explanatory, of course, the higher the number of COVID cases, the darker the patch of the country. You'll see those purple areas are the purple areas that I just spoke to that have popped up more increasingly in the last 8 to 10 weeks. But right at the end of this little video reel, what you'll see is a map of the country as it was in March, which is went there. So that map of the country was when we first went into lockdown. So you can see actually the coverage and the number of cases has grown rapidly across the country. What we're doing with this data, rather than just make a note of it and stare at it, is use it to identify where fitness facilities are and where coaches are in the UK, to connect those with the people that, as Col said, are struggling in those local areas. So say, for example, Leeds is an area of the UK that has been heavily hit with with COVID cases. So that's where we would connect with local facilities in Leeds, local coaches in Leeds, to explain what it is that we're doing and help connect them with local individuals who need help. When it comes to the individuals who need help, we wanted to give you guys a bit of a preview of what you might expect and what they may have experienced. So we're going to play for you a short video which shares where 3 individuals share their account of COVID-19 with you.
It's called a novel virus, which means it's new to all of us.
Hi, my name is Charlie Peters. I'm 30 years old and I'm currently living in northwest London. I'm a professional Muay Thai fighter with over 13 years experience, but I'm currently transitioning over into endurance training. I'm working my way to a half Ironman later this year. I've had 67 professional Muay Thai fights, former 3-time world champion and the current UK #1. So I work at various gyms around London, taking group fitness, as well as personally training individuals to teach them boxing or Muay Thai. I cycle quite a lot around London and I'm always on my feet, walking anywhere and everywhere that I can. So I'm very, very active. So I got COVID.
I was having my 60th birthday on the 3rd of April. And so from the beginning of January up until then, I was on a mission and I was absolutely determined I wasn't going to hit 60 feeling less than my best self. So, you know, swinging 16K kettlebells and running around and doing all sorts and bouncing about, feeling as fit as a fit thing. I got back down to my fighting weight. I went to the supermarket at 7 a.m. and I think I got it there.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm 38 from Warwickshire. I contracted COVID around mid-March. I'm now 19 weeks post-COVID.
So one thing I remember clearly from COVID is feeling how fatigued I was. I literally didn't do anything all day, but I just felt exhausted.
It's knowing what fatigue is. It's different to tiredness. I felt absolutely fatigued, absolutely completely wiped out. Breathless going upstairs, total fatigue, absolutely wiped me out.
My initial symptoms were very flu-like and lasted only around a week. But the hardest part of it was the 3 weeks after that. And I really did feel super fatigued, really struggled actually to go about my daily business. And that was quite difficult. I'm an at-home mum of 2. There was a moment where I was quite afraid. The effort on my lungs was quite intense.
But I noticed my heart rate just shoot up. And even if I tried to run really slowly, my heart rate would stay high. I've done a lot of sprint work. Heart rate is a clear indication of how much stress the body's taking. That's when I knew something was quite serious. I was more so frustrated mentally. I'm so fortunate that, I've been okay.
My heart doesn't skip a beat normally, but I could feel my heart thudding in my chest, and I felt fatigued for 2 or 3 days afterwards. My neck I could feel my pulse in my neck. My head felt it was going to explode. After that took me really downhill.
Maybe I trained 4 times, maybe 5 times a week before. I do a lot of resistance work, mainly circuit-based. If I do any cardio, it is mainly on the biking side. Initially, just getting back on the biking side was really, really difficult, and I couldn't maintain long sessions.
So clearly I'm not unusual. There's quite a lot of people who are going down that road. All consuming, and just to walk downstairs and get a cup of tea was exhausting. And by the way, during the night, I've had this really, really weird pain in my head, and my cheek feels numb. And she just said, you've got to get an ambulance and get yourself to hospital quick, because you might be having a stroke or have had a stroke. They've said I've got some mild neurological nerve damage. If you go to a class and say, right, well, we're going to do an EMOM, every minute on the minute. I don't think my brain could actually process that as well at the moment. I'm really scared to start again, because I don't know whether it's going to trigger it off all over again. But I don't want to not start again, because I want to get back to myself. But I don't know when the right time will be to start.
It's not really how much you do. I think it's probably short and steady wins the race with this kind of thing.
So that can be as simple as a 5-minute walk on a treadmill, and at a given pace, at a given kind of incline, and it's just see how the body responds, and almost
try and figure out what kind of resources we need, what kind of testing we need, what kind of staff we'd need.
So at least I'd say about 8 to 10 weeks since I've been feeling better. You get to learn your body in a different way, in a different manner. My body's never been through something like that. I've never been through it mentally and physically. So I feel like I've learned a lot more about myself. I've been extremely lucky. I've been extremely, extremely lucky. What you learn about yourself going through a battle like that is an amazing thing to happen. But I've been very fortunate, very lucky in comparison to many other people. So my thoughts are with them, definitely.
Because it never stopped. It never bottomed out. Without a vaccine, we are looking at a very different world for the next 2 or 3 years.
We need a new normal for everything, don't we?
So special thanks to Charlie, Jan and Kate for sharing their accounts of COVID-19 with us. And you also saw in that video Lee Halftek, who's an elite level rehabilitation coach, and Dr. Mick Malloy, who is an emergency medicine and disaster medicine specialist who we've been working with as part of our program development. What the guys shared there and what they experienced is beyond what is commonly talked about, often a cough, cold and a period of isolation. But by no means is it the most extreme version of what COVID can look like. I won't read out all the comments and all the posts on the next page or two, but we just wanted to share with you some verbatim posts and messages, sort of pleas for help, pleas for advice that people are sharing across social media who are dealing with COVID and dealing with long COVID, just to show you a bit of an idea of how wide ranging the spectrum of symptoms can be. This slide is possibly one of the more brutal slides and pieces of data that we talk about when it comes to COVID-19 symptoms. Cole will go into the data on this slide a little bit for you now.
Yeah, this goes back to this notion of not considering COVID-19 purely in the context of mortality. So this was data derived from Professor Vo over in the States, who looked across the board, done some epidemiological observations and studies, and said that for every one person who died of COVID-19, we had 19 who would require hospitalization. 18 of those would have permanent heart damage for the rest of their lives. 10 will have permanent lung damage. 3 will have a stroke. 2 will have neurological damage that leads to chronic weakness and coordination, lack of coordination. And 2 will have neurological damage that leads to loss of cognitive function. So again, this is the far more severe end. So this is based on the notion of those hospitalizations, which is as extreme as it gets. And a big part of the strategy has been about, trying to ease that burden and making sure that those kind of vulnerable groups aren't put into this position. I think sometimes it's purely about the life-saving part of it, which, don't get me wrong, is profound and important, but this is an insight to the rest of it. So when we discuss long COVID or long haulers, every single one of these makes up a part of that population, but we're not going to engage with this type of population until they are 12, 24, 36 weeks down the road. So they'll have gone through acute primary care, some level of hospital-based rehabilitation, maybe, if they're lucky, some community rehabilitation. But then after that, they are on their own. And as was put across in that video we just watched, some people are starting to come to terms with the reality of a chronic condition, a chronic disease, that previously wasn't on their radar. They had no idea. This wasn't something they were dealing with. They were fitting well. And then because of the trauma, because of the damage sustained through COVID-19, they've now got to step into a world where they're dealing with neurological factors, respiratory factors, cardiac factors. So this is the real deep end of rehabilitation. This is still the minority. The majority of people, and even the majority of those who make up long haulers, are people who are dealing with severe deconditioning and post-viral fatigue. So it's not as complicated as this. But everyone from this type of population, from this far-reaching part, all the way through to that person who previously was quite fit and just can't get back there, typically because they're pushing too hard too soon. This is that growing population of people who've experienced COVID-19, are now classed as no longer symptomatic. So it's back to it. Pick up your life from there. And what we're seeing across the board, across the world, and we're certainly a hotspot for it here in the UK, is this is becoming quite a big population. This is affecting people wide and far. So yeah, this is, as you said, Mel, this is quite brutal stacks, and this does kind of take a moment to digest. There's much more to COVID than mortality, and there's much more to COVID than just the initial someone lost a bit of sense of smell, taste, had a cold, felt rough. There's far more to it. And as time goes by, we're starting to unpack that and realize just exactly what the far-reaching consequences are.
Just to add a more positive tone to a lot of the information that we just shared there for the last few minutes, this is just a bit of a snapshot of an email that was sent to one of our coaches who'd gone through the rehab training program. I'm on CC, as you can see. They'd sent the email through to say thank you to their rebuild coach, who had only been working with them by this point for about 7 to 10 days. But as you can see in her words, she felt that he'd saved her. So it's messages like these that caused us to reach out to Aaron very originally, and messages like those that you saw in the post before, because we would like to connect, as we said at the very front end, more coaches and more clubs with more individuals like this across our communities who are needing help. So how have we been doing it? Okay, so as we said, very beginning, the club, the coach is front and center to us in all of this. So if we look at you guys in the middle of the screen here, in terms of who you can help and who you can support in your communities, top left, we're going to have clients and members that we already know that at some point will have been affected by COVID-19 or long COVID. So in that instance, we're ready to go, best prepared to help them and work with them in all the normal ways we normally would, just with a new level of understanding around COVID. There's also going to be a ton of newcomers, tons of people across our digital communities, local communities. They can even be friends and families of existing clients and members who are also seeking support. So we're working with clubs and coaches to help them to spread that message locally and online far and wide, to let people know that there's a local resource for them if they do need help. There's also new types of conversations that are going on between local GPs, primary care groups, community rehab groups, and clubs and coaches now. GPs are very open. Of all those that we've spoken to and any of those that our coaches are speaking to, they're all hyper receptive and very welcome and very much welcoming conversations from coaches who want to receive patients who have been released from acute care to work with them moving forward. We're also finding that, I mean, corporate outreach, right, has been something that we've done as a sector since the dawn of time, but it's a slightly different scenario now. Many people, as you guys will be aware, have been off sick with COVID or long COVID in some instances since March. They're terrified that they're going to lose their job. When they turn up for work, they're losing concentration. They can't read emails. They can't commute to and from work. Employers are having to lay out for sick pay, and that creates an additional financial strain on the employer. So all that obvious stuff. And ultimately, the employer also feels a sense of responsibility for their employees in terms of rehabbing them back to full health. So corporate employees being way more receptive than they were before about engaging with local fitness professionals and organisations. And then another community that we didn't necessarily foresee coming into the picture this soon, but we've had schools, universities, colleges reach out to us who've got students who have suffered with the virus, and the school wants to provide local support but wasn't sure who was able to. So again, this is an opportunity where coaches can dive into all of those elements of the local community and get hands-on to help. That all sounds sort of easier said than done on a PowerPoint slide, sure. But just to provide some context, our very first rebuild coach, actually, on graduation, within a week, he'd acquired 22 individuals who have had COVID or struggling with long COVID, and has been working with those since. Col, I'm going to ask Col just to explain a little bit now about the training program that we devised, that the coaches have been going through. One of the questions we get asked a lot is, it's a novel virus, so how do you know how to put a training program together? So Col will just explain a little bit on that and the curriculum structure, and then I might dive in and just share some answers to some of the questions that we get asked most frequently about the course.
Yeah, so I'll start with the curriculum. So it's a spiral curriculum, and what we mean by that is that we take aspects of the learning with us as we go through. We did that on purpose because we're well aware of the fact that people, it's about being time savvy and not having to, if you might dip in, you might do part of a module, watch a video one day, you might not get a chance to return to it until 3 or 4 days later. And what we didn't want is for people to go, right then, what did we cover on Monday? I'm going to go back through that and then get to this. So So the content builds, and we don't leave any aspect of it behind. We take it through and we consolidate it. So we consolidate our understanding as we move through the program. So it's a spiral curriculum. On this notion of it being a novel virus, therefore, how can we know what to do about it? Well, if you'd asked me that question 3 months ago, I'd have had a slightly different answer to the one I have today, because our understanding of how this virus functions is developing and improving every single day. And whilst I wouldn't say that the stage of being, predictable, there's certainly much more about it that's far more consistent. Even with this morph that has been present over this past week, there's still a level of understanding attached to this morphology and how it's adapting next. But more importantly, forget all that, the trauma it causes. So in the first instance, it was primarily considered to be something that affected the respiratory system. So the virus itself sat upon cells of the lung, and that was where it was invoking its harm. But then we found out quite quickly that it was able to attack the hemoglobin in the blood and not necessarily manifest on the lung tissue. It could affect cardiac tissue. It could affect nervous tissue, some aspects of the vital organs. So what we know is the damage, the trauma it can cause, and they lend themselves perfectly into our well-established understanding with regards to cardiac rehabilitation, COPD, metabolic syndrome, helping people recover from strokes, other neurological conditions. So the list goes on and on. So it's embedding what we know, best clinical practice, best rehabilitation, restoration practice in the context of what harm, damage the virus provokes and elicits in the wake of it. Also, we know stacks and stacks about post-viral fatigue. We know plenty about deconditioning. And really, it's about bringing all that together and being able to say, right, then let's look at it specifically through this lens and within this context, and therefore the things that we need to be mindful of with regards to our initial assessment. Prior to that, there's the questions we ask, which feeds into our initial assessment with regards to their exercise capacity, their strength, their function, and therefore how we prescribe meaningful, engaging physical activity at the right rate, structured exercise, so that we work with the fatigue. I've researched fatigue now for over 20 years in many of its multifaceted forms. You can't work against fatigue. It's not like tiredness. It's not, and I apologize if I'm teaching grandmas how to suck eggs here. It's not a case of just, no pain, no gain, go hard, yeah, we're going to feel tired. It's none of that. You've got to work with fatigue. And the principles of that we've embedded within this. We've looked at contraindications. We've looked at recognizing the points that we need to make a referral. But more importantly, what we wanted this program to be was empowering, getting us back to best practice, recognizing the strongest aspects of our skill set and how we can embed them here, and then extending that skill set. So that's really the purpose, the focus, and the structure of the program we put together.
The guys that that come on board with us tend to ask how the program's delivered and received. So the Rebuild program comprises 61 videos. It's all delivered and learned online, primarily because of the times within which we're living, of course. On average, anybody that goes through the program, they tend to get through the program in about 30 to 45 days, but we have had coaches more recently get through the content within about 14 days, and typically they're individuals who've got kids and got jobs. So whilst we wanted to make sure that the course was comprehensive and contained all the necessary stuff, we wanted it to be something that you guys could comfortably fit in and around work and lifestyles, and be comfortable dedicating time to. Within the program, as with all of our programs, there is a live Q&A every single month with Col as well. So if there's stuff that any of our guys get stuck on in terms of content, or if they're working with a particularly complicated client scenario, in fact, we've got one this afternoon, haven't we, Col? Then we dial onto those every month, and the guys can come and share ideas and share challenges together. There's also a test at the end. So as an individual completes the course and passes an online assessment, a certificate is then issued, and then the coach is then referred to as a certified graduate rebuild coach. And from there forward, unless anybody has any preference not to, we list every coach that we work with on our CAWS Registry of Graduates. So as we receive inquiries from individuals who are seeking help, we can then take a look and see where the coach is that lives closest to them and connect them so that they can work together. That said, all things do not or necessarily always operate equally in life, of course. So for right now, we have, for example, more coaches living in the south of the country than we do the north of the country. So if we have an individual that needs help in the north, we are still connecting them with coaches that operate in the south, and they're quite simply working with people remotely or digitally and so on. When we built the program, we built it with PT operations in mind, in that there will be environments that we all work in where remote coaching is necessary and becoming part of everyday life more and more. But because, of course, of the restrictions of COVID-19, we didn't want any obvious barriers to helping people get in the way of what we were all trying to achieve. So these are the bits, trigger happy finger again. These are the bits that we've spoken through with Aaron in the last couple of weeks, in terms of next steps and different ways that if any of you guys watching and you may want to get involved and learn a little bit more. So Aaron, are you happy for me to just kind of bounce through these top to bottom?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Ace. So the Rebuild program went online at the end of October and is available now. I just explained that it can be delivered, the learnings for you guys after the course can be delivered in the gym, at home, outdoors, wherever you are with your clients already. Because of the relationship that we have with YourPT and Aaron and the guys, as a YourPT coach, you would automatically receive 25% discount off any CAWS coach membership if you decide to get on board. From the outset, and hopefully this comes across a little as you hear from Colin and I today, we always wanted to make more of an impact on the sector than be only an education company. And as part of that, a contribution from every monthly membership is reserved to fund projects for vulnerable groups and rebuilding the fitness industry on the back of 2020. We just spoke a little bit about the time that's most likely required to dedicate to completing the course. That said though, a lot of coaches will start to engage with members, local communities, local general practitioners after around 10 days, by which time anybody that's going through the content starts to really understand the fundamentals of what you're dealing with in terms of the virus and how best you can support individuals. So you'll be pretty confident by that point to start to engage in those sorts of conversations. So we do encourage that rather than you needing to wait until you're certified before you can at least begin discussions. I'd mentioned just now about our Registry of Graduates, so that already exists and that's growing by the day. There is actually 3 courses within a CAWS coach membership. We have the Rebuild COVID program, then we have Rebound, which is more of a generic sports performance and training performance oriented short course, and then we have Fortitude, which works with teaches, trainers, coaches, you guys, how to work with individuals who are dealing with other types of conditions, including cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, who have had a stroke or cystic fibrosis. So you can dive into the membership and just go through the COVID course, but what a lot of the guys are doing is bouncing from Rebuild and heading on to Fortitude thereafter. The reason that the program was built in this membership model was because a lot of the content, of course, relative to COVID is going to need updating and adding to as we learn more about this novel virus. So by it being a monthly membership means that we can chime in with new content all the time to keep you guys updated and also provide you with additional content. Yet we appreciate that also we're living in a strange world at the moment, and finances are tough for absolutely everybody. So we wanted to create the flexibility. So it means that an individual can chime on and sign up to complete the course. You could go through Rebuild in a month, and then if you chose to, you could cancel your membership right away. They're the main nuts and bolts of the course, unless Colin, Aaron, I've missed anything. Otherwise, we'll stop talking for a little while in case there's any questions from you, Aaron, or from the guys on the floor.
No, I don't think there's any questions from me. I think you've covered a lot, and actually there's a lot of information, a lot of takeaways there as well for everyone to digest afterwards. I think there's obviously some, you know, sort of humanistic opportunities for trainers and coaches to kind of support, you know, people in the local area that might be kind of suffering from long COVID, or, you know, finding it like with fatigue. You know, we've seen professional athletes even over in the States, you know, professional NBA players that have had fatigue for 7 months after getting it in the first instance, and they are at the very top end of their field, the people that we don't think are going to get sick, and maybe sort of we'll just brush it off, but they're really not. So we can obviously imagine how it is for, you know, the sort of average person on the street that's getting the same fatigue, the same issues. They don't have access to the same level of coaching, support, rehabilitation. They don't have a professional team around them. So I think there's a real opportunity for trainers and gym operators to actually sort of step in and help people out. I think we've already started contacting all of our gym operators. Obviously, once, you know, PTs are sort of certified and they've finished, or even sort of halfway through, actually, like you said about contacting GPs, they should also be doing the same thing with their local clubs, obviously where they PT, maybe just the entire gym operator for that area, to let them know that, you know, this is available, and they're to be able to help. So if the gym does get any inquiries about, look, I've had this, I need help with recovery, they know they've got a certified coach that's actually qualified to deliver that. And we'll be doing the same thing with the operators on a more national level. So once we know which trainers we have qualified, where they're based, the same with any of our kind of corporate clients, we'll be letting them know exactly where our coaches are, who we have available, and signposting them towards our trainers that are qualified anyway.
Amazing. Thank you, mate. You've been, you and the team have been really integral in helping us to drive awareness, not only with those that need help, but with your team and with the clubs that you already work with. So thank you.
No, it's been a pleasure. I think obviously for myself and James and the team, it's one of those things where, you know, as an industry, we've kind of been banging the drum a little bit of how essential we are, and how well positioned we are to actually help people recover and sort of have this fight against COVID. Now that we're sort of back open and we've got a sort of vaccine coming or already out, it's not really a time for us to kind of stick our feet up and just hope for the best, that there's something we can do and actually show that we are essential, and obviously see the success of it, track the data. And then obviously, you know, when we do go and present this sort of information, we actually have proof that, you know, we are actually there to support and stop people from relying or having to relocate and go to these rehabilitation centers. They can find somebody locally to help them out. So I think we're in a position to help, and we've got an opportunity to do it. And I think we need to start doing things right away.
Thank you, mate. That was exceptionally put. Col, anything else that you'd like to add, or message for the guys listening?
No, I think we've laboured a lot on the state of affairs, but the reality is, it's my firm belief, is that we are the industry that's going to bring about the measurable change in this. Don't get me wrong, the vaccine's really important, but actually, no vaccine's going to give people their quality of life back. It's going to just prevent them from having an infection. When it comes to actually realigning people's expectations of what they can achieve, the quality of their life with regards to their activities of daily living, and beyond that, you know, I do see within this, bizarrely, an opportunity to enhance the perceived value of health as we move forward from this point. I think the world has been shown that health is the primary target, that's what we should all be physically active and making food choices about. It's about being healthy. And then from a foundation of health, we can target specific sports or fitness pursuits or whatever it is we want to do. But health comes first. And I think that I totally agree, Aaron. You know, we've made a big claim with regards to our place in this, being preventative and actually a part of the solution. And I think now it's the opportunity for us to step up and actually deliver that. And I think that we've got every reasonable expectation is that more people will come to us. We'll break, for the past 25 years, around about 12 to 14% of the UK population engaged in, you know, exercise meaningful enough. I think there's an opportunity to break that. I genuinely think that if we get this right, if we start to work with these people and we start to have that broader impact, we can quite comfortably grow that beyond whatever it's been, 20%, 25%, easily, just by getting the right messages across and working with these people. And it's down to PTs, it's down to coaches. That's the infrastructure. It's within the community, it's within society. That's who people respond to. So it's down to us to do it.
Yay. Right. If there's no questions from the floor, our contact details are on the screen, guys. So if you do have any afterthoughts or there's anything you want to kind of chat about hereafter, just drop us a line. Otherwise, again, massive thank you for giving us your time this afternoon. Massive thanks to Aaron for coordinating and bringing us all together. Stay safe and thanks for being legends.